Now, I've done a lot of videos about tubes, but I want to do something a little bit different today. Instead of talking about a brand or a line of tubes that I think you should buy, I want to talk instead about the tubes that I like and why I like them. I also want to talk about a relatively new kid on the block that surprised me. These have been in my amp the last few weeks, and if you watch the channel, you probably recognize the amp itself. That's the Transcend amp from Eric Audio, but you might not recognize the tubes. Now, this is a CryoTone tube from Wathen Audiophile. Now, I'm going to get into what's so special about this tube in just a few minutes and why I really, well, I'm not going to get into that yet. Hold on. I want to talk about a couple other things first. I have two rooms here at home that I listen to music in. One is the main room, what Mandy and I call the vinyl room, where we have our main equipment and the stuff that we like to listen to the most. Then we have a smaller room where I'll test equipment that comes in. And sometimes that equipment will make its way to the main room. There are two manufacturers of new production tubes that are kind of my go-to, or always have been my go-to, well, for the last couple of years anyway. And one is Pavane and the other is Ray Tubes. Now, with Pavane, it's their Horizon series. Their Horizon series is what hooked me. And with Ray Tubes, it's their Reserve series. And to briefly get into why, it's because each of them have their own unique voice. The Pavane Horizon series, like the KT88s and the 6SN7s that you see here, have incredible clarity and imaging. Incredible clarity and imaging. Probably the best I've heard. But, and there's always a but with tubes, the bass is a little bit laid back. And they're immersive, which I really like, and that's a common theme that you'll hear. But with the Pavane Horizon tubes, the top is rolled off, and I like that. I like that for the main listening room, the one I'm sitting in right now, and I also like it for my ears. I have tinnitus, and for some reason, it gets exasperated when I hear high-pitched noises. Now, with the Ray tubes, specifically their Reserve series, it's very similar to what I hear with Pavane, and there's reasons for that. Now, I do believe the Reserve series, the Ray Reserve series, comes from, or at least these tubes, come from the same manufacturing facility as Pavane. But I will say, they hand select their tubes as well. And these are a little bit more, they handle the low end better. They've got a little bit more bass. It's a little bit tighter. But the sound stage is pulled in a tad. So like I said, it's a give and take depending on the tubes you want and what you're going for. What is that voice that you want to get out of the tubes and out of your system? So do you go with, a bit more bass and stick with the Ray Reserve tubes? Or do you want that clarity and a little bit wider sound stage and give up a little bit on the bass like you would with Pavane, the Pavane Horizon series? Like I said, there's no real answer. And for me, it all depends on, what music am I listening to? I'll go through spurts where I'm listening to a lot of acoustic music or maybe a lot of jazz or a lot of heavy metal or classic rock, all the above. And then there are these CryoTone tubes that I mentioned earlier. Now, what sets these apart? They're cryogenically treated by Wathen Audiophile. I know it sounds like science fiction, and exactly what is cryogenics and what does it mean to cryogenically treat a vacuum tube? NASA uses it on parts, as do many other companies. And now cryogenics meets vacuum tubes. There is a science behind it. I guess the best way to put it is cryogenics causes metallurgical changes at a molecular level. Now, there's no disputing that. That really does happen. And in some treatments, the tubes are frozen at less than 300 degrees Fahrenheit for an extended period of time. Imperfections and internal stresses can be relieved by this process. For example, with steel components, a cryogenic soak makes those components a little bit harder, a little more wear resistant. The metal structure becomes denser and more uniform, which is why a lot of companies will use cryogenics to treat their, say, engine parts or also cutting tools. It's also said to improve conductivity and electron flow. That crystal lattice that forms as a result of the treatment allows or provides a path for the electrons to flow smoothly through. In a vacuum tube, electrons jump from the hot cathode to the plate guided by grids. If the metal in the cathodes, grids, and plates have fewer crystal defects, electron flow might be more consistent. So physical changes do occur and seemingly for the better. But what about the tube's tone and voice and how it sounds? I mean, to take a tube and to freeze it, that seems like, set aside the fact that you need a lot of equipment. It seems like a relatively easy thing to do. You take that tube, you put it through a cryogenic process, you take it out, and you have a cryogenically treated tube. That's one thing. It's a complete different thing to say that that tube now sounds better. One thing that I have noticed when outfitting my system with CryoTone tubes is that they sound brilliant right out of the box. Typically, with every tube I've ever had or been introduced to, I'll put it in my system, and out of the box, they'll tend to be maybe a little bit bright, maybe a little bit harsh, but the ones that I end up falling in love with and the tubes that usually stay in my system over time are those that, as the more I listen to them or the longer they spend in the system, they'll smooth out over time. They'll become creamy. That's the best way I can put it. I heard somebody else use the word creamy. I think it might have been Ron at New Record Day used the word creamy to describe certain tubes or certain systems. Well, that's what I always find myself going for. And I do find that with these CryoTone tubes out of the box. But it's more than that. Not only do these tubes sound smooth out of the box, they also bring now this is hard to describe, but the best way I can put it is my system sounds tonally balanced. Now, what do I mean by tonally balanced? This is kind of where subjectivity comes in. And what I hear is a full sound. And these probably have the best bass response I have ever heard in a tube. I don't care if it's new production or if it's new old stock. But another thing I will say, that they're unforgiving. And let me give you an example. It depends on the recording, it depends on how it was mastered, but if you have a very sibilant recording, you're probably going to hear that using these tubes. And that's not a bad thing. That's because these tubes really don't interfere with the signal that's coming from my cartridge. So if that song has a lot of bass, it'll pick it up. It'll flow through to the tubes and then onto the speakers. If it's very sibilant or they don't roll off the high end like, say, the Pavane Horizon or even the Ray tubes. They don't roll it off as much. So what you're getting is that signal unmolested. If ears were taste buds, it would probably be the perfect blend. Nothing fights for attention and everything feels balanced. Now, a lot can be said about listener fatigue, and that is not the case with the CryoTone tubes. I know it sounds like I'm trying to sell these, but I'm not. I'm just kind of excited about them after I get to hear them. And I did want to talk about it because that's what I do here. I talk about the tubes and my experience with the system, especially with the vinyl playback experience. And it has enhanced that. I found myself just sitting here in this chair, putting on record after record and just enjoying the music. Like with everything else, it's a give and take, and it all depends on maybe my mood in a certain time, or what is it that I'm listening to, what type of music, and what do I want to get out of that experience. But if you were to ask me, do I have a favorite tube or a set of tubes, a type of tube? That's hard. I've listened to a lot of tubes. I mean, you've got the CryoTone now and the Ray tubes and the Pavane, all of their different series, and new production tubes like Mullard and Gold Lion and JJ and Tungsol, and there's others. And new old stock tubes too. I have Mullards and Telefunken and RCA and Sylvania. I've listened to a lot of tubes, but I'm going to stick with new production tubes. CryoTone is I would say, my latest obsession. And not only because they're unique and cryogenically frozen, but I like to understand what it is about them that makes them sound the way they do. I think what really, really interests me is trying to understand, how do you take a tube that's manufactured as any other tube on a particular line, take the tube, cryogenically freeze it so that it becomes something physically different than the other tubes, and have it sound good. Now, I've been trying to learn as much as I can about cryogenics and tubes and as it applies to tubes. There's something there. And this isn't the last time you're going to hear me talk about CryoTone tubes. It's a constant learning experience, and that's why I love doing this and love testing different things and hearing different things. I learn what I don't like and I learn what I do like, and then I like to share it. And I also like to hear from you about what you like and what you want to share. I learn just as much from the comments and from folks who email me or contact me through the website than I do from my own research or my own ears. And that's about it. If you found this helpful at all, please like and subscribe. I also have a newsletter that comes out once a week. It's free to join. I'll put a link in the description. And really, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And until next time, take care of yourself, enjoy your records, and I will see you soon.